In honor of what were to be the 2020 Summer Olympic Games in Tokyo, for now scheduled to be the 2021 Games, emphasis on the for now, I want to take a look back at the last time Japan was in the global spotlight for hosting the grandest stage in sports. More specifically, seeing as this is a hockey channel, I want to take a look back at the historic tournaments played for my favorite sport, as for the first time, the National Hockey League took a 17-day break to allow their talents to compete, and as you may have noticed, I said tournaments. That's because this was the first year where the top women's players in the world got to showcase their talents. Historic to say the least, this is Nagano 98. To begin, let's focus first on said women's tournament. The best way to summarize the action, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Canada entered the competition as heavy favorites, with the United States viewed as their greatest challengers. They were joined by 4 other nations in the 6-team event, featuring the likes of Finland and Sweden, unsurprisingly, as they are 2 traditional hockey powers, but as well by China, who alongside the other nations mentioned finished top 5 in the prior year's World Championships to qualify. They were also joined by host Japan, because they were the hosts. Now, not to discredit them, but in this group stage, every team played each other once. The top 2 nations would go on to the gold medal game, seeds 3 and 4 would play for the bronze. And Japan, well, they scored 2 goals and allowed 45. They wouldn't see the Olympic stage again until 2014 in Sochi. The other team not qualifying for a medal game, shockingly, was Sweden, who won just a single game out of their 5, finishing with a -11 goal differential. This despite the fact that goaltender Charlotte Gothesen finished with the 3rd highest save percentage in the tournament. The Lady Crowns have been present at every Winter Olympics since, however, and would earn a bronze and silver over the course of the next 2 games. That brings us to the bronze medal game, where you'd be shocked to learn that the United States and Canada weren't playing. They'd play for the gold later on that same night, but we did see China, who won 2 of their 5 games, primarily thanks to the fantastically nicknamed goaltender, the Great Wall of China, Guo Hong. They'd take on Finland, who won 3 of their games to that point. So needless to say, the Chinese were certainly underdogs, as the goal differentials would show, a -5 for China, but a +17 for Finland. And Finland also won their first meeting 3 days prior by the score of 6-1. It wasn't that lopsided this time out though, but the Finns would still win and take home the bronze with a 4-1 scoreline, outshooting their opposition 23-9. Forward Riikka Nieminen would finish as the tournament's top point getter with 12 points in 6 games, 3 points clear atop the board. And honestly, she's worthy of her own video, as one of the greatest and most highly decorated female athletes of all time. Just one of the many interesting factoids about her, 20 years later, in 2018, she'd become the oldest player ever to win a medal in ice hockey at the Olympics, taking that record away from fellow Finn Teemu Selanne, who had earned it 4 years prior at the age of 43. Riikka was 44 at the time. Which brings us to the final match day of the group stage on Valentine's Day 98, a preview of the gold medal game as the US and Canada battled it out to maintain their undefeated records. The Americans would win that game 7-4, ending the group stage with 33 goals for, allowing just 7, compared to the Canadians, who scored 28 goals but allowed 12. Now this rivalry, a rivalry that has had the same intensity, unpredictability, and entertainment value all the way up until present day, was certainly intact here. The favorites in Canada, though, having already lost, well, the stage was set for something shocking, and at the end of the day, too, you look at this United States roster. They were led by top goalie of the tournament, Sarah Teutling, future IIHF and US Hockey Hall of Famer Karen Bai, and future Hockey Hall of Famer, the captain of the team, and current scout for the Seattle Kraken, Cammi Granato. For Canada, well, let's start off between the pipes again, where we would see the first woman to play in any of the major North American pro sports leagues when she suited up for the Tampa Bay Lightning in 92 and 93 during preseason action, Manon Rhéaume. These next 2? Well, recently promoted by the Toronto Maple Leafs as heads of player development, you had tournament-leading goal scorer and future Hockey Hall of Famer Danielle Goyette, as well as a first-ballot Hockey Hall of Famer, the greatest women's player of all time, Dr. Hayley Wickenheiser. Gretchen Ulian would start off the scoring for the U.S. in the second period. Apologies for pronunciations there, perhaps. And it looked like her goal would be the only one that we'd see until the insurance tally came with just over 9 minutes left in regulation from Shelley Looney on the power play. Goyette for Canada did get one back on a power play opportunity of her own 5 minutes later, but it was too little, too late. An empty netter sealed the deal, and the U.S. forever secured the bragging rights in this rivalry to say that they were the first Olympic gold medalist in women's hockey history, winning the game 3-1. But it wouldn't be the last time these two nations would meet in the final, not by a long shot. That's a different story for a different day. The men's tournament began with a preliminary round to determine who would move on to the main show. 2 4-team groups, 1 game against each opponent, with the top team of each group moving on. You had Group A, which was topped by Kazakhstan, who went undefeated with 2 wins and a draw, and were the only team to finish the group with an above-even goal differential. And Group B saw a similar result, with Belarus going 2-0-1 to advance, with an even larger differential of +10 compared to second-place finishers Germany, who had a -2. For what it's worth, host Japan would defeat Austria in a shootout to avoid finishing dead last in the tournament. So with that, we saw Kazakhstan earn the right to play in Group C, alongside Russia, Finland, and the Czech Republic. Unsurprisingly, they were absolutely blown away, losing all 3 games and finishing with just 6 goals, while allowing 25. Luckily for them, these group stages were there to help determine bracket seeding, so they'd have at least 1 more game. Yay! Finland, led by the likes of captain Saku Koivu and Teemu Selanne, who tied for the tournament lead in scoring with 10 points apiece, they would finish 3rd in the group, with their lone win coming against Kazakhstan. Then you had the Czechs, who won 2 out of their 3 games, losing only to Russia off of an incredibly strong performance from Dominik Hasek in goal. Remember that name. Oh, and it helps having the likes of Jaromir Jagr, Robert Lang, Martin Ruchinski as well. And then we have the Russians, who topped the group, going a perfect 3-0 thanks to an all-star lineup featuring Sergei Fedorov, Alexei Yashin, and captain Pavel Bure, who would finish as the tournament's leading scorer with 9 goals. Nobody else had more than 5. The team scored 15 goals in those first 3 games. It's not difficult to see why either. We revisit beautiful Belarus, who now find themselves in Group D, with Sweden, the United States, and Canada. It went exactly as you'd expect. They lost all 3 games, scoring 4 goals and allowing 15. We move on to the team that finished directly above them. We have the United States, who won just 1 of their 3 games, yes, over Belarus. A very disappointing result, given that this team had a frankly absurd lineup. Mike Richter in goal, Chris Chelios, Pat LaFontaine, Brian Leach, Kevin Hatcher, John LeClaire, Brett Hall, Jeremy Roenick, Doug Waite. It goes on, but still they struggled. In second, we have Team Sweden, who only lost a close 3-2 game to Canada in the group stage. They too had a strong lineup, as you'd suspect, with Tommy Salo in goal, Daniel Alfredson, Matt Sundin, and others leading the way. And topping the group, who else? It's Canada. 12 goals for, just 3 against. Patrick Waugh was practically unbeatable between the pipes. But if you look closely beyond the glimmer of the cup rings in Waugh's ears, you'd see that not all was well. The Canadians entered the tournament surrounded in controversy, and it all starts with GM Bobby Clark, who not only constructed this team, but was still the GM of the Philadelphia Flyers at the time. Side note, if you want to see a history of him as an NHL GM, you can check out this video I made about his trade history, as well as other GM trade history videos, links in the description and in the comments. Clark had elected to name Flyers star forward Eric Lindros as team captain over the likes of Wayne Gretzky, Steve Yzerman, Ray Bourque, Al McInnes, and others, as well as naming forward Rob Zaminer to the team over the likes of Mark Messier, Ron Francis, Scott Niedermayer, and others. That's not a shot at Rob Zaminer, but you get the points. They also boasted the oldest roster in the tournament with an average age of 30 compared to the tournament average of 28. So with that, the quarterfinals were set. Russia, as the top team in Group C, would take on the bottom team of the opposite group in Belarus. The Russians would win convincingly 4-1 the final score with goals from Valery Kamensky, Andrei Kovalenko, Pavel Bure, and Alexei Morozov. Sweden, as a 2 seed, would take on perennial rivals in Finland. It was a very close 2-1 scoreline, but the Finns would prevail thanks to Teemu Selänne's 2-goal effort in the third period. Sweden was only able to crack Finnish netminder Jarmo Myllys, if I'm not mistaken there. Hey, some of these Finnish names. They only beat him in the final 12 seconds. Peter Forsberg with the solo effort. Canada would take on Kazakhstan, which turned out to be about as close as the Russia-Belarus game. A 4-1 victory thanks to goals from Joe Nieuwendyk, Shane Corson, Brendan Shanahan, and the previously aforementioned Steve Yzerman. The lone goal for the Kazakhstani team came from Konstantin Safronov, who just won the KHL's Gagarin Cup with Avangard Omsk, so he rebounded from this pummeling quite well. And in the final quarterfinal matchup, the U.S. took on the Czechs, and the nightmare tournament continued for the United States. They scored the opening goal late in the first as Mike Modano accomplished the rare feat of beating Dominik Hasek, and then the Czechs would cash in on 4 unanswered goals from Vladimir Ruzicka, Jaromir Jagr, Martin Ruchinski, and Yuri Dopita to advance to the semifinals. It marked the USA's 5th straight Olympic tournament without medaling since the 1980 Miracle on Ice, something that's not often mentioned, their struggles in the immediate aftermath of that tournament. And so it was Canada, the last team from Group D standing, taking on the Czech Republic in the first semifinal match. With just over 10 minutes to play in regulation, defender Yuri Slager found the go-ahead goal that would seemingly push the Czechs to the gold medal game. But with 1 minute and 3 seconds to go, Trevor Linden tied the game for Canada, sending us to a shootout. Forward Robert Reichel stepped up for the Czechs and would score against Patrick Waugh, putting the Czechs ahead, and then Theo Fleury would step up for Canada. And then Ray Bourque, Joe Nieuwendyk, Eric Lindros, and Brendan Shanahan. And Dominik Hasek stopped them all. The Czechs were off to the gold medal game. Canada was stunned, and Coach Mark Crawford was heavily criticized for not sending out the likes of Wayne Gretzky and Steve Yzerman, even if the former was never particularly great in the shootout. In the other semifinal, we saw the complete opposite. It was a shootout of a different kind between the Russians and the Finns, with Finland outshooting Russia 31-21, but the Russians winning 7-4. Pavel Bure opened the scoring, posting a natural hat trick in the process. That's 3 straight goals for his team, for those who do not know. But the Finns fought back in the second period with 3 unanswered goals of their own from Raimo Helmainen, Kimmo Rantanen, and Teemu Selänne. Have I mentioned how great he is? Alexei Zhamnov, though, would score for the Russians again before the end of the second period on the power play, only for Saku Koivu to tie it for the Finns 5 minutes into the third. But from there, the firepower was just too much. 3 more Russian goals in the final 13.5 minutes would seal it. Andrei Kovalenko with 1, and 2 more goals from Pavel Bure later, and the Russians were off to the final. Man, would a Pavel Bure retrospective also be pretty fun. So with that, the medal games were set. Finland would meet Canada for the bronze, where, again, Canada was stunned. Jari Kurri would open the scoring 3 minutes and 33 seconds into the first for the Finns. Canada would tie it with Rod Brindamore before the end of the period. However, less than a minute later, Jari Lehtinen would score for Finland yet again. It's looking kind of rough, but Canada ties it under 3 minutes into the third period thanks to Brendan Shanahan. But 17 seconds into the third, the damage was done. Billy Peltonen scored a goal that would see Canada's goal-driven campaign end without a medal for the first time since 1988, while the Finns picked up their second consecutive bronze medal. And in the gold medal game, we had the Battle of the Titans. The Russians, in just their second games as a nation since the collapse of the Soviet Union, had the ability to dominate offensively like they did in years past, thanks to the likes of Pavel Bure. But then you had the Czechs, looking to win their first and only gold medal in their history, what would be the only gold they'd win as a nation in Nagano in all competitions. Irresistible force against a movable object. Something had to give. and in front of the largest audience of the tournament, over 10,000 people, they witnessed Dominik Hasek posting a 20-save shutout. The Czechs would win 1-0 off of a third-period goal from Peter Svoboda, capping one of the most magical performances of all time, and certainly one of the best goaltending performances of all time. Another Olympic miracle, to say the least. Overcoming the powerhouses ahead of them, those nations newly revitalized by the inclusion of NHL talent, but the Czechs were equally as revitalized, and they all fell short to this team of destiny led by a future Hockey Hall of Famer in Hasek. An exciting tournament of firsts, controversies, collapses, triumphs. Nagano 98 was everything you'd want from a hockey tournament, and then some. And hopefully, maybe, possibly, potentially, in 2022 we'll see the NHL return to the Olympic stage. As you know, the potential is there for an incredible tournament, or should I say another, as the evolution of the women's game as well has set that bar very, very high for their next turn in the spotlight. So with that, I want to thank you all for watching. Again, links are in the description for other videos I've made, as well as links to my other 2 channels here on YouTube. The appropriately named Toogie24, my new home for non-NHL content and Let's Plays, as well as the official channel for the Toogie's Take podcast, for those of you who prefer to watch the podcast rather than just listen. Of course, you can find my podcast on all platforms, so check it out if you haven't. As well, feel free to check out the channel update that I recently put out discussing all my plans for this channel moving forward. A friendly reminder as well, all videos are uploaded to Patreon early, so a big thank you to those you see on screen now for supporting me on that platform. You are all greatly appreciated. And feel free to let me know in the comments as well what topics you'd like to see me cover for future videos, although patrons do get that first suggestion. Whether it be player, a game, tournament, whatever, if it has an interesting story, we will talk about it. Thanks again for watching. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you next time.